Well, hey, welcome to First Church. So glad you guys are here. If you're new, my name's Chad. Welcome. We are excited that you chose to worship with us today. In addition to the great crowd we have in the room today, we have a whole bunch of people joining us online, such as Ben from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Chelsea from Coweta, Bob and Eleanor from Kentucky, and a whole bunch of other people. So if you are on site today, would you get loud, put your hands together, welcome in our online family. Let them know how excited we are. They are also joining us for worship today. And I am excited because today we are launching our series which will lead us into Easter. We're calling it This Is the Way. And you heard us correctly. Easter is almost here. We're just a few weeks away from Easter. And so we want to remind everybody we are having 6 Easter services this year for the first time in our history. So you get to choose a service to attend and hopefully serve at another one. And here in just a second, there's going to be a QR code up on the screen. You can scan that QR code, find out more about our Easter services and how you can be involved. But it's going to be an awesome celebration of Jesus' resurrection. And also today, if you are in the room, you probably noticed in your seat, there are these Easter invite cards. Pick up one of those cards. We've got extra out in the lobby. Take as many as you want and invite people to one of our 6 Easter services. Like I said, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. And I'm also excited about this series that we're launching today because I believe over the next few weeks, God is going to do some incredible stuff in this series. And as we get started today, I just want to let you know where I'm going in the message today. Before you leave today, I hope that you will leave with 3 words ringing in your ears. Whether you're here on site or watching at home or somewhere else online, I hope that you will walk away from this sermon with 3 words etched on your heart, 3 words planted deep within your soul, 3 words on your mind. And those 3 words are, listen to him. No matter what, no matter where you find yourself, no matter who you're with, no matter where you're going, always, always remember to listen to him. And in just a few moments, I hope you will understand why those 3 words are so important. I want to ask, have any of you ever had somebody pretend to know you better than they actually do? Ever had somebody act like that they know you better than they actually do? Maybe it's innocent, maybe they think that you guys are closer than what you actually are, and they thought you were a close friend, you just see them as an acquaintance, and it led to an awkward moment. Or maybe somebody's been a little bit more deceptive, like they just want to use you or get something from you, so they act like that they know you better than they actually do. Maybe they dropped your name at some point to get something out of you. Or maybe it's even worse than that. Have you ever received one of those text messages or phone calls where somebody is trying to scam you and they pretend to know you better than they actually do or pretend like that they know who you are? Well, I have a friend, his name is Shane Phillip. He preaches out in the Las Vegas area, and he had a scammer text him the other day, and he did something that he normally doesn't do. He decided to respond to this scammer, and he was telling me about it, and I asked him to send me a screenshot of the text conversation because I thought it was great, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I don't necessarily recommend doing this, but this is awesome. Take a look at this conversation. So again, my friend Shane, he receives this text message. He does not know this number, has no idea who this person is. And the scammer starts off by saying, "Good afternoon. What are you doing today?" And Shane, my friend, says, "Just waiting for your text." And so the scammer replies, "Oh, that's great," with a smiley face. "Do you have time tomorrow?" And my friend says, "Sure do." And so the scammer comes back and he says, "Did you get my invitation card yesterday I sent you?" And he says, "Yes. Tell me what you read in it." And my friend says, "It was an invitation card." And so the scammer comes back, "Huh? Are you kidding with me?" And Shane says, "Didn't you send me the invitation card? Was that not from you? I thought you sent it." And the scammer says, "Excuse me, I'm confused now." And so Shane comes back and he says, "What, am I no longer invited?" And the scammer randomly says, "Can I get your picture?" And so my friend goes, "I thought you sent the invitation card. I don't understand." What you understand. Great English from this scammer here, okay? And so Shane responds, "What you understand." And the scammer comes back and says, "I just tell you, send me your picture if you." Shane says, "Huh? Why do you need my picture again? I am very confused." And so the scammer goes, "Why don't you send me your picture?" And Shane says, "Did you not send me the invitation?" You have my picture. Why are you asking for it again? You know you have it. And the scammer goes, because I have doubts with you. Never talk like that with me. And so Shane goes, are you joking? What are you talking about? And the scammer responds, why don't you, what rubbish? I love that. Isn't that a great response? What rubbish? And Shane goes, you never used that word before. And the scammer goes, tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth. You've never used rubbish before. And so the scammer goes, if you don't tell me the truth, I will block you. And Shane goes, are you for real? Is this a joke? Am I no longer invited? And so the scammer says, I'm not joking with you. And Shane says, I'm not joking. You've never used rubbish before. And the scammer says, block. I love that. And Shane says it's the first time that a scammer actually blocked him, you know? How great is that? That's awesome, isn't it? And I love that because Shane just revealed that that guy or girl, whoever it was, did not know him like they said they did. See, sometimes we meet people who pretend or act like that they know us better than they actually do. But let me flip that for a second. Have you ever pretended like or acted like that you knew somebody better than you actually did? Anytime in my life when I've done that, it never ends well. And let me take that question to a whole different level. Have you ever treated Jesus like that? Have you ever pretended to know Jesus better than you actually do? Have you ever acted like that you know Jesus better than you know you do? Have you ever pretended to have a deeper relationship with Jesus than you actually do? According to a recent Gallup survey, 68% of Americans identify as Christian. That's a pretty big number, pretty high number. It's much lower than what it was 20 years ago, but it's still a pretty high number. The overwhelming majority of Americans claim that they are Christians. But let me ask you, do you really believe that 68% of our country has an active, ongoing relationship with Jesus? You see, there's a seismic difference between liking Jesus and following Jesus. Or for me, to put it another way, there's a seismic difference between liking Jesus, knowing who he is and approving of his teachings and all that, liking Jesus, and listening to him. And that's what we're gonna see in Matthew chapter 16 as we study God's word today. See, Matthew chapter 16 contains this well-known and famous conversation that Jesus has with his disciples. Because in Matthew 16, we're in the third year of Jesus's earthly ministry. And so he's getting close to the cross. In fact, we're just days away from him being arrested and going to the cross and eventually defeating death and rising from the dead. But we're not quite there yet. And so before Jesus goes to the cross, he wants to make sure his disciples know who he is. And so he asks them a question: who do people say that I am? And so the disciples give the common responses that they've been hearing. And one disciple says, well, some people say that you're a prophet sent from God. And then another disciple says, others say that you're John the Baptist back from the dead, because John the Baptist had been killed at this point. Another disciple says, well, others say that you're one of the prophets from old, like Elijah or Jeremiah brought back from the dead. And Jesus says, yeah, that's great. That's what everybody else is saying about me. But then he makes it personal. And he says, but what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? And that's not just an important question. That is the most important question. Because Jesus either is who he claims to be or he's not. There is no middle ground. And our faith is only as strong as the one in whom our faith is placed. So let me ask you the question that Jesus asked his disciples some 2,000 years ago. Who is Jesus? Because how you answer that question matters. It's not just an important question. It is the most important question. It is the question that all of life hangs on. And there are a lot of different responses to that question in our culture today, just like there were in Jesus' day and age. Some people will say, well, Jesus was a great moral teacher, and they leave it at that. Like, they like his teachings, but they're not gonna go as far as to say like he's the Son of God. But he's a great moral teacher. Other people say, well, he was a great philosopher in history, and they put him on the level of other great philosophers throughout history. Some people say, well, he was a prophet sent from God. They're not gonna say that he's the Son of God or the Messiah, but he's a prophet sent from God. In fact, there are other religions that teach that Jesus was a prophet sent from God. Some people don't like Jesus at all, and they call him an infidel or a heretic, troublemaker. And some people miss the boat altogether, and they say, well, he was just a political revolutionary. But Jesus tells us there is only one correct answer to that question. And that's the answer that Peter gave on the day that Jesus asked that question in Matthew 16. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven." Now, if you've read the Gospels, you know Peter says a lot of dumb stuff. I mean, Peter puts his foot in his mouth a lot. He often speaks before he thinks. We know this about Peter. But on this day, Peter was on fire. On this day, Peter got it right. On this day, Peter had been listening. He'd been paying attention. Peter got the right answer. And Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus responds, not just that Peter's right, but that the answer that Peter gave actually came from God. That what Peter just said, that's heaven's response. That's heaven's answer to the question. And this is like the best day of Peter's life. He finally got a question right, and not just a question right, he got the question right. But my question is, did Peter really know what he was saying? Did he really grasp what this meant? Because before I got married, if you were to ask me to define what marriage is, give you a definition of marriage, I could have done it. I could have given you a great textbook answer for the definition of marriage. I mean, I went to Bible college and had a class called Marriage and Family. I was an expert after I finished that class on marriage, you know? I mean, if you would have asked me to define marriage, I could have given you a good biblical textbook definition of marriage that probably most of you would agree with. But it wasn't until I got married that I started to realize how much being married would transform and change my identity. Some of you in the room today, some of you ladies dreamed of being a mom for years before you were a mom. And you watched kids, maybe you did some babysitting, maybe you took care of younger siblings, and you had seen other people being mothers, and you dreamed of being a mother. And you even sat through a health class and watched that horrible video that scarred you for life about childbirth, and you still wanted to be a mother after that. But some of you have shared with me, it wasn't until you held your baby in your arms for the first time that you realized how much being a mom would completely change who you are. See, Peter has the right answer. He knows intellectually who Jesus is. But Peter does not personally yet know Jesus by that identity. See, the reason why I say that is because of what happens right after this conversation. Jesus starts to talk then about how he's going to have to suffer and die and go to the cross, but eventually he's going to defeat death on the third day. He is going to rise from the dead. Now, Jesus has talked about this before. This is the first time that he's talked about God's plan to save and rescue the world. But again, he's getting ready to go do it. He's getting ready to go to the cross. So he's reminding his disciples of God's plan to redeem the world. And as Jesus is talking about having to suffer and die and go to the cross and all that because Easter is coming, this is what Peter does. It says Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. That takes some guts, doesn't it? "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." In other words, I'm not gonna let this happen to you. I like how one translation puts it, Then Peter took hold of Jesus and scolding him, began to correct him. Now, how do you go from in one moment saying, Jesus, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God, to the very next moment rebuking Jesus and correcting him? Now, we can get mad at Peter and say, how could Peter do that? But don't we sometimes do the same thing? I mean, maybe we don't, audibly rebuke Jesus, But how often do we come to church on a Sunday and we're singing praises to Jesus and we're singing that he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords and we're praying in his name, but then by Sunday afternoon, we're living for ourselves again? What I have discovered is this: there are some people who very much like Jesus, but they find parts of Jesus problematic. Oh, they like Jesus. They like him being their Savior who's going to forgive them of their sins and show them grace and all that. And I'm not making light of that. That's an important thing. But there are other parts where Jesus tells them how to live. I don't know about that. And let's face it, Jesus said a lot of controversial stuff. Jesus said a lot of stuff that goes against the cultural grain, that goes against what's commonly accepted as normal in our world today. Things like pray for your enemies, love your enemies. Things like forgive people even if they don't forgive you. Jesus taught for us to turn the other cheek. Jesus said we're to go the extra mile for people who don't deserve it. Jesus says the last will be first and the first will be last. That goes against everything our culture teaches us. Some of that stuff makes us feel really, really uncomfortable. But out of all the controversial things that Jesus ever said, probably his most controversial statement is this one found in John 14, verse 6. Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is controversial because of what Jesus didn't say. Jesus did not say, I am a way to God. Jesus did not say, I know the best way. Jesus did not say, I am one of many ways. Jesus said, I am the way to God. And then he says, in case you didn't get it, no one comes to the Father except through me. That's a pretty definitive statement. And a lot of people have trouble with that because they think it sounds too exclusive, too narrow-minded, too unloving. In fact, I've had people come to me and say, Chad, do you really believe that? I mean, doesn't that sound unloving? Doesn't that sound too judgmental? Doesn't that sound too narrow-minded? And my response to them is always, well, it depends on who Jesus is. So let me ask you the question again. Who is Jesus? Because I'm going to tell you who I believe he is. I believe what Peter said, that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that's what this church teaches. And we don't apologize for that. Because here's the deal. You can't make the claim that you are the Christ, that you are the Son of God, and there be any middle ground on that. You see, some people say, well, I think Jesus was a good moral teacher, but I just don't think that he's God. Well, here's the thing. He claimed over and over again that he was the Son of God. So how can he be a good moral teacher, a good moral man, but lie about being the Son of God? See, Jesus is either exactly who he claimed to be, or he's a lunatic, a liar, or the greatest con artist who ever lived. There is no middle ground. There is no in between. And if we're a church that is founded on Jesus, then we are going to teach and proclaim that Jesus is exactly who he claims to be, that he is the Messiah, that he is Lord of all, that he is the Son of God, and that he is the only Savior of the human race. C.S. Lewis, in his work, Mere Christianity, put it this way: a man who is merely a man, just a man, and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic or the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else he's a madman or something worse. If Jesus isn't Lord, then he's either a liar, a lunatic, or the greatest con artist who ever lived. See, but if he is the Son of God, which we believe he is, you know what that means? Then he is the only voice worth listening to. And Peter isn't quite grasping this yet. Peter is struggling. And that's why when he rebukes Jesus, Jesus responds in this way. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." So Peter goes from being praised by Jesus for giving God's answer to the question, who am I, to a moment when Jesus is now rebuking him, calling him Satan. Peter goes from having his best day to his worst day in a matter of moments. But here's the deal. Jesus isn't finished with Peter yet. And some of you right now, you may be struggling with that question, who is Jesus? And that's okay, we're glad you're here. We wanna have a conversation about that because we wanna share with you who we believe Jesus is. And here's the thing about Jesus, even if you're struggling, he has room for that. He has room for your doubt and for you to ask your questions. And if you will come to him, he will continue to show you who he is. And that's what Jesus does next for Peter. See, in Matthew 17, as we move on, it says this, it says, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and 2 other disciples, James and John, the brother James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Now, the other gospel writers record this event as well, and they give us some extra detail. They tell us that when Jesus, Peter, James, and John go up on the mountain, they go up on the mountain for the purpose of prayer. So they're praying together. Imagine having this mountaintop experience, literally, with Jesus, and you are praying to God the Father. What a cool moment this must have been. But we also find out from the other gospel accounts that the disciples who were with Jesus fell asleep while Jesus was praying. Now, that doesn't surprise me. I preach to you people every week. You guys fall asleep every week on me. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I get that, okay? There can be something really good going on and you still fall asleep. I get it. So at least that's what I tell myself. But anyway, Jesus is praying, mountaintop experience, and the disciples fall asleep. But something wakes them up. As we read on, it says, there, Jesus was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. See, what happens here in this moment as Jesus is praying, he begins to be transformed, transfigured into his heavenly appearance. He starts to reflect his heavenly glory. And so what that means is his face is shining like the sun, like his face is blazing with supernova brilliance. It's like looking at the sun, and his clothes are so white that the disciples have never seen anything that white before. In fact, Mark gives us this commentary. He says, his clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds more like a Tide commercial to me than anything else. But I think Mark is stretching language to its limit. He doesn't know how to describe what those disciples witnessed on that day. What he's trying to say is, we had never seen something so white as the clothes that Jesus was wearing in that moment. This was a big deal. And let me ask, have you ever been asleep? Like you've been asleep and been in a really dark room, and all of a sudden somebody flips on the lights and you're startled, it wakes you up, that light penetrates your eyelids. I remember my dad used to do that to me. When I was a teenager and I would oversleep for something, he would come in my room and flip on the lights. It'd be total, dark, and he'd flip on the lights. I used to hate it, and I would get mad that he would do it, but he was my dad, so he could get away with it. He's allowed to do it. I tried that one time on Allison when we first got married. I only tried it once. I didn't do it after that, okay? Because it didn't work out the same way, okay? But if you've ever been dead asleep in a dark room and somebody flips on the lights, you know that feeling of light penetrating your shut eyelids. That's what's going on here. Except this light is brighter than the sun. And when the disciples wake up to this bright light, they see a different scene than when they fell asleep. When they fell asleep, it was just Jesus there with them. But when they opened their eyes, look at what the text says. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Now that's Moses and Elijah from the Old Testament who died hundreds of years before this moment. Dead guys talking to a living guy. That's a pretty big deal. That's an unusual scene, isn't it? That's not something that we witness every single day. And I don't know how Peter, James, and John knew that this was Moses and Elijah, because they'd never seen them before. Again, they died hundreds of years before Peter, James, and John. So I don't know how they knew. I don't know if in heaven, like everybody wears name tags, or I don't know. I don't know how they knew that it was Moses and Elijah. But they knew somehow. And these aren't just any dead guys. This is Moses and Elijah. I mean, Moses was known for being the lawgiver in the Old Testament. Elijah was known for being the greatest of all the prophets. In fact, when the people years ago in Jesus' day and age would refer to the Old Testament, they didn't call it the Old Testament because they didn't have the New Testament yet. So when they would refer to the Old Testament scriptures, they would refer to it often as the law and the prophets. So Moses and Elijah, they symbolize all of the Old Testament. And here these two larger than life figures are standing with Jesus. But here's the thing. It's not Moses and Elijah that are shining like the sun. It's Jesus who's shining. And Moses and Elijah are looking to him. This is a big deal. And this is too much for Peter to comprehend. I mean, Peter has no idea what's going on, but he's excited. He's excited to be there. And like I said, Peter often puts his foot in his mouth, and he does it again. As we read on, it says, Peter said to Jesus in this moment, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters," basically 3 shrines or tabernacles, one to honor you, and one to honor Moses, and one to honor Elijah. Now, some people learn by listening and observing. Peter learned by saying the wrong things. And so once again, Peter says something before he thinks about it. And I love Luke's commentary on this. Luke says Peter did not know what he was saying. I love that because I think Luke is basically saying Peter could sometimes be an idiot. Peter could be a dummy sometimes. And Peter's having one of those moments. But I get it. I can identify with Peter. Because there have been moments in my life when I've talked about things that I had no idea what I was talking about. And Peter has no idea what he's talking about. I mean, he says, let's make 3 tabernacles, basically 3 shrines of worship. One to you, Jesus, one to Elijah, and one to Moses. What is he doing? He's putting Moses and Elijah on the same level as Jesus. We're going to worship all 3 of you. And what he's missing here is that Moses and Elijah are there for Jesus. And Peter, James, and John need to be there for Jesus as well. This is a big moment. And Peter still isn't quite grasping what's going on. And so as Peter is talking about things that he shouldn't be talking about, making a fool of himself, God interrupts Peter. You ever been interrupted when you've been saying something foolish and you're glad somebody interrupted you? That's what happens here. God interrupts Peter. It says, while Peter was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. Now, there are only 3 moments throughout the gospel, 3 times throughout the gospels, when God, the Father, audibly speaks from heaven. It's a rare thing. It doesn't happen a lot. We would think it would happen more than it does, but only 3 times in the gospels does it happen. And this is one of those moments when God the Father speaks, and what he says is very brief, but when God speaks from the heavens, we need to pay attention to what he's saying. And what God says is very similar to something he had previously said. See, this time in Matthew chapter 17, we're at the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. Remember, he's getting ready to go to the cross. But 3 years prior to that, when Jesus started his ministry, when he was baptized by John the Baptist, if you remember that scene, as he's being baptized by John the Baptist, the heavens opened up and God the Father spoke. Do you remember what God said from heaven? On the day that he was baptized, God said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Sound familiar? It's the exact same phrase. The exact same words that God will say again 3 years later at the end of Jesus' ministry. Except when God says it again on the mountain of transfiguration, God adds 3 more words to it. This is my son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. Listen to him. What's God saying? You know who he is. I've already told you who he is. You've spent 3 years with him. You've listened to him teach. You've seen him do miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. You've even confessed that you know who he is. You know who Jesus is. It's time for you to start listening to him. If he really is Lord, you need to listen to him as if he is your Lord. You need to put aside all of your own agendas. Put aside your own selfish thoughts. You need to stop trying to control things. Stop trying to fix things on your own. Stop trying to be master of your own universe. Stop trying to tell me what to do, and listen to my son. Because in the end, his voice will be the only voice that matters. Listen to him. See, we have here 2 of the greatest Old Testament heroes standing with Jesus. And there was a day and age when God opened up the ground and swallowed up some of his people because they would not listen to Moses. There was a day when God brought about a famine because of a drought, because the people would not listen to Elijah. But now in this moment, God is looking past Moses and Elijah, and he is pointing to Jesus, and he says, listen to him, listen to my son, listen to Jesus. And today, as I preach this message, I know that there are tons of people who know who Jesus is. But my question is, are you really listening to him? Because there's a difference between liking Jesus and listening to him. And Jesus didn't come to be your life coach who gives you advice so you can pick and choose what you want to follow. Jesus came to be your Lord. And there is no middle ground. He either is Lord of your life or he's not. And there comes a point in all of our lives when we have to decide, what are we going to do with Jesus? Because there are thousands of other voices out there trying to get us to listen. I mean, there are inner voices, like the voice of pleasure whispers, please yourself. The voice of riches says, comfort yourself. The voice of pride says, promote yourself. The voice of egotism says, trust yourself. And in addition to the inner voices, there are so many voices all around us that are trying to get us to follow them. My dad talks about a day and age when there were just 3 television stations. Anybody remember when there were just 3 TV stations? Anybody remember that? Okay, a few hands. I don't remember that day and age, but apparently it existed. And then you guys got a 4th channel, and everybody thought the world was gonna come to an end. But in this day and age, how many outside influences are there for us? I mean, there are Netflix voices and Hulu voices and Wikipedia voices and Instagram voices, and there are Facebook voices and YouTube voices and Apple TV voices and MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and the Weather Channel voices, all crying out to us. And do you know how many of those voices want to influence you? Every single one of them. They don't just want to inform you, they want you to listen to them. They all have an agenda. And they want to tell you how to live life. And in a world full of distracting voices, it's more than those. There are distracting voices when we go to work, when we go to school, when we're playing sports, when we turn on our phone. There are distracting voices everywhere. And in a world full of distracting voices, God's answer is listen to Jesus, listen to my son, listen to him. And God said this to those disciples on the mountain because he knew in just a few days Jesus would defeat death. And once Jesus defeated death, then he would be uniquely qualified and of everyone who had ever lived, because Jesus would then be the one person that death would answer to. He would be the one person that would know the true path to life. And God is saying, you've got to make sure you're listening to him, because there's gonna be a lot of other voices out there that are gonna try to tell you how to live, but he is the only one uniquely qualified to tell you how to live a true, fulfilled, and lasting life. There were these Sling TV commercials that came out a few years ago. You may have seen some of these, like this one, a tree fell on a house. And all of a sudden, this Uber Eats driver pulls up and he's like, hey, this is what you need to do. And he starts giving out instructions and orders, and the people are like, are you a contractor? And he goes, no, but I've watched a lot of home improvement shows on TV. And there's another commercial in the same vein of this flight attendant. She gets on the intercom and she's like, is there a pilot on board? Apparently something has happened to the pilot. They're in midair. And so at that time, we see this picture of a guy who's dressed in a pilot's uniform raise his hand, and this other guy jumps in front of him. He's like, I got this. And he goes up to the cockpit. They're like, are you a pilot? He's like, no, but I've watched a lot of guys fly planes on TV. And I love this guy's face. He's like, sit down, man. You know, he does not want that guy flying his plane. You see, you want somebody qualified flying your plane. You want somebody qualified working on your house. And when it comes to life, the only person who's qualified to tell us how to really live is the one who defeated death, because everybody else is subject to death. There is no other way around death unless you know the one who death answers to. And so I'm not embarrassed of Jesus' words when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm not embarrassed of those words. I don't hide from those words. We don't hide from those words. You know why? Because those words are only unloving and unkind and narrow-minded if Jesus isn't who he claims to be. But I believe he is who he claims to be. And so if he is who he claims to be, how could I not share those words? You know why? Because before Jesus, there was no way. He made the way. And Jesus' claim to be the way isn't a problem to avoid, but it's a promise that is meant to be shared. Because Jesus provided a way when there was no way. So I'm not upset that Jesus says he's the only way. I'm just glad that he provided the way for us. Because without him, we were lost. My wife, Allison, was taken to the hospital, to ICU in Tulsa a few years ago, and a lot of you guys know that story. I'm not gonna get back into that, but I had to follow the ambulance there. And so when I got to the hospital, I parked my car and I was going to ICU where she was. And I'd never been to this ICU, it was like a special ICU. And so I got on this elevator and I just kind of stood there. And I don't know if I was in shock or just not processing everything that was going on, but I just stood there like expecting the elevator to take me where I need to go. And I didn't hit any buttons or anything. I was just kind of standing there. And this guy got on the elevator with me. He worked for the hospital. I don't even remember his face, but he got on the elevator with me, and he could tell that something was up. And he goes, where are you trying to get to? And so I told him I'm trying to get to my wife. She's in this ICU. And he said, oh, you can't get there on this elevator. You've got to go to another building and get on a different elevator and go to ICU. And it's on such and such floor, and you got to go there. And then I get mad at him in that moment and say, no, I'm on this elevator. I want to go to my wife. I've already worked to get to this elevator. This elevator is going to take me where I need to go. I could have rode that elevator all day long and stopped at every floor, and I never would have got to my wife because I was in the wrong building. I was on the wrong elevator. No, when that guy told me that, you know what I said to him? Thank you, because I wanted to get to my wife. And I rushed to the other elevator, which took me to her. See, when Jesus says, I am the way to God, he's not being unloving. What he's doing is he's saying, you're on the wrong path. And the path that you're on right now is never going to get you where you want to go. But you come follow me, I'll get you where you want to go. I'll get you where you need to go. I love how this passage ends, because it says, if you want to move on to the next slide, there we go. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. See, there's going to come a day when all of us will open our eyes and all we will see is Jesus. There's going to come a day when we will open our eyes and everything will come into focus. And all the stuff that we experience in this life and work so hard for will be gone. And on that day of clarity, when everything comes into focus and we open our eyes and only see Jesus, your heart will break if you haven't been listening to him. And his heart will break if you have not been listening to him. See, the reason why God says listen to him is because his voice is the only voice that leads to life. And some of us need to make a decision today. What are we going to do with him? Because there will be a day when it's too late. But right now, it's not that day. All of us have the choice to make today whether or not we are going to listen to Jesus. And I believe there are some people in our church right now who need to start listening to Jesus in a way like they haven't been. And I don't know what that means for you, but over the next few weeks, I'm going to be challenging our church to listen to Jesus and do what he is calling you to do. And that's especially true for those of you who haven't been baptized into Jesus. We're going to have a special Sunday, 3 weeks, April 13th. We're going to call it All In Sunday. Because I know there are people in our church who have thought about being baptized or have been making excuses for why they shouldn't be baptized or whatever else, and they know that they need to do it. But you haven't done it for whatever reason. And maybe you've just never gone all in with Jesus in baptism, and that's just the decision you need to make. Maybe you were baptized as a kid, but you didn't quite understand what you were doing. Maybe you were talked into it by somebody else, and you need to make that decision as an adult. Maybe you were baptized as a kid and you understood it, but you went away from God and you just want to do it again because you want to have that assurance. I'm not sure what the reason is, but if you need to be baptized into Christ, we're going to have this Sunday as a challenge to anybody in our church that needs to do it. And we're going to have everything ready for as many people that wants to come and be baptized into Christ, go all in with him. Now listen, we baptize people any day here. Every Sunday is baptism Sunday, okay? So if you want to get baptized today, we will do it today. We're not going to put it off if you want to do it today. You can call us at the middle of the night and we'll come out and we'll baptize you, okay? But sometimes we just need a target. Sometimes we need some space to talk to somebody. And so if you want to talk to somebody about this, or if you want to sign up to do it on this Sunday, you can scan this QR code. You can text baptism to that number on the screen, 918-300-3977. We would love to talk to you about it. And I hope that that Sunday, April the 13th, is going to be a day that we will always remember in our church. As we are a church that together goes into Easter Sunday, saying we are a church that is listening to him. Would you pray with me? Father, I thank you so much for today, and I thank you for this time we've had to open up your word. And I just pray, Father, that we would be those who are listening to you, doing what you are asking us to do. In the name of Jesus, I pray, amen.